so I can make it in 20 minutes. But I thank you very much for the introduction as well. It always sounds so much better when somebody introduces you somehow. I never think of my accomplishments otherwise. But anyway, we're going to start, and I just wanted to mention, in Canada, most of the immigrants arrived because of the pogroms in Eastern Europe. And they basically settled in the same way. And I'm going to start with Winnipeg very quickly, just as an example. And what happened with the Jews when they came to Canada, because most of them were Orthodox, they didn't want to work on Shabbat, and the only way to do it was if they were self-employed, basically. So they became peddlers, and eventually they set up shops. And this pattern repeats itself in every city that we're going to talk about. And in Winnipeg, we have the main street where you can see all the Jewish stores. And the non-Jewish used to call it Jerusalem because of the high concentration of Jews. The Jews called it Mitzrayim because they weren't thinking that it was the best place to be. But if you move to Toronto, which had a much bigger Jewish community, they basically settled in Kensington Market because that's where they could get a lot of the produce to peddle, and also where they could open shop. And there are two markers, plaques in Kensington Market, and it's basically designated as a National Historic Site. And you can see the plaque, and if it's national, it is kind of burgundy. And basically, it was designated in 2006, and it tells you that the Jewish immigrants who converted the Victorian houses into small family-run stores by adding makeshift ground floor shops. As a result, the area was known for decades as the Jewish market. And there is a wonderful Heritage Minute video that was produced a couple of years ago. And from past experience, videos don't work very well in presentation. So what I did is I got screen shots of the video, and that's the beginning of it. And I'm going to narrate it. You can imagine the music that comes with it. And it starts with that it was the Jewish market, and Victorian houses became storefront, as you can see here in the illustration. And you had the kosher butcher, which was a staple in every community, tailors, bakeries. And what happened afterwards, as soon as the Jewish population started becoming more affluent, they started moving out, and other immigrants started taking over the spaces, and each arrival adds their own flavor and whatever else they're bringing with them, and other languages and very different characters. But the village really still remains. And here it shows you a map of the Kensington Market. And what I wanted to point out was the two synagogues that are marked on this. And one of them is actually within sight. The markers are here, and you have the synagogue here. And there were quite a number of synagogues. And basically what happened in those areas is the Jews recreated their own world, and it was self-contained. So they had the synagogues, they had the jobs, they had the mikvah, they had the schools, and everything else that they needed to survive in the new world in which they came to. And as I said, as soon as they became more affluent, of course, they started moving away from this area, and other immigrants started taking their place. And these days, when you go to Kensington Market, you're going to see a lot of signs in very many different languages. And in Ottawa, it was the same thing. The Byward Market acted as the receptacle. And you can see Friedman is still marked there. And basically, this is where the area they started from and then moved away. Now in Montreal, I did choose Montreal as the site because Montreal has a much older Jewish community. In Quebec in general, it started off at an earlier time. Not as early as some of the presentations I've been seeing, but relatively speaking, compared to Canada, it was more an older community. And you can see in the city of Montreal, busy. And even in the 1700s, Jewish merchants were coming and dropping off stuff in the Montreal harbor, but there was no settlement yet. It only started a little later on. And then again in 1840, you can see the port is still very active, and still Jewish merchants are coming and trading crafts. And then the steamboat started arriving in 1849. This is the old area called Old Montreal, and this is where the port was. And basically and most people who came, it came to Montreal in the 1870s and on, they came by boat. And what happened was that the Jewish community that existed in Montreal, they would go to the port and meet the new immigrants and take them and try to help them to settle down. Some of them came with very little possessions. Some people came with there was a much diversity, and some people were more affluent and they settled in different area. And one of the interesting things that I found was in most other communities like Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, and Winnipeg, most of the Jews came from Eastern Europe, from Latvia and Lithuania. In Montreal, there was a much wider variety of places they arrived from. There was from Romania, Galicia, Germany, Lithuania, and Poland. So you had a much more diverse community that was coming to the city, but nevertheless, they were all in the same boat, literally and figuratively speaking. The Jewish community in Montreal grew quite significantly between 1871 to 1881 and consecutive years. And as I said, it was getting away not very favorable situation in Europe because the Jews were persecuted in one way or another. And again, this is where the old port of Montreal was, and this is Saint Laurent Boulevard. And as you can see, it starts from the port and goes north. And the Saint Laurent Boulevard has been commonly known as the Main, and that's where the title to my presentation is. And it was designated as, it was 6 kilometers that were designated as a National Historic Site. And again, you see the markers, the plaques that the federal government would put. And there is one at the beginning of the Saint Laurent Boulevard, Saint Laurent Boulevard, and there's one at the other end, 6 kilometers away. I did not walk the 6 kilometers, so I don't have that one. But nevertheless, this is where the Port of Montreal was. And as we go through Saint Laurent, I'm going to walk you a little bit, you'll see a different, there's the Chinese community in the Chinatown, there was the Jewish, the Portuguese, the Italian, all the different immigrant groups settled along that way because it did end up at the port, and that's where they would get the merchandise and were able to sell it. And we'll see the small factories, the textile industry that developed there. And of course, it did lead to quite a number of movies and books and poetry that was written about it. And as I said, I'm going to walk you a little bit through the Main, and this corner here is actually here. The port, the gate is a more recent addition, and you're going to start with Chinatown, and you'll see the different merchants and the different buildings, and the end of the arch will tell you that you're out of Chinatown, and you get into the red light district, and this is the nicest picture I could find that was not X-rated, so there you go. And but you also have the Just for Laugh Festival theater that's there, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but it's quite famous in Canada and I think in the United States as well. And this is an old picture of the corner, and you can see the streetcars and all the different, it was quite a busy street, and there was like the light post. This is the building that sits on the corner right now. So there's like, you know, some of it has not survived, but some of the other buildings, the smaller buildings have survived along the street, and you're you can still see the remnants of them. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is Saint Laurent Boulevard. Again, you start here at the port, and you can see that it bisects the island of Montreal. And it was always a division, not these days, but originally the French settled in the east end, the English settled in the west end. So there was, and it was a main street, so that's where it got its name. And it was a division between the population, and then the Jews came along and added a third language, which was the Yiddish, and you can see Yiddish coming up. It was basically the language that they all spoke, no matter where they came from. And you can see it in the ads for just to let a flat, or just, and even Ogilvy's was advertising to encourage Jewish peddlers to obtain their supplies from them. And you can see it's all Yiddish, to come to the recruiting for the Great War. Again, all Yiddish. The matzevot, the advertisement was in Yiddish, and of course you have the sign that, and this was actually, unfortunately, when I went on this past December, this thing is closed, but I didn't have the heart to take pictures of it when it was gone, because it's been such big part of my life. It's always been there. So you can see, again, the Jewish influence on that. Of course, the Jewish theater, so you had singers, you had entertainers coming, and they would take place in the Monument National Theater, again on this on the main, and this was at the heart of the Jewish community. It was inaugurated in 1893, and Jewish entertainers started coming very early. So you had even the Jewish entertainment, that when apparently it was the best theater around. And you can see here the amateur troops in front of the theater as they're putting up productions. And of course, this was the main entertainment for the immigrants that were settling there. One of the big changes that happened, it was the publishing of the Canada Adler, the Jewish daily. And this was started in 1907 by Mr. Hirsch Wolofsky, and he actually had a fruit and vegetable store. He started as a peddler, but his son played with some matches and he burned down the store. And from the insurance money that he got, he decided he was going to establish a newspaper. And of course, it was published in Yiddish, so it had quite a good circulation. But it meant also that the Jewish people, the Jewish immigrants, knew what was going on. They were going outside their little world, because up to that point, the world was very contained within very few blocks around the main. And suddenly you knew what was going on around the city, and you knew what was going on around the world as well. It was not just local news that was coming up. The other thing that many of the Jews got involved with was the schmata business, or I do know some Yiddish, or the clothing manufacturing. And again, that gave them the opportunity to be able to close on Shabbat, on the Jewish high holidays. Some of the Jews some of the immigrants that arrived were tailors, so they had the knowledge and what to do. And the clothing manufacturing in Montreal started rivaling the Lower East Side of New York, and a lot of the clothing manufacture in Canada came from Montreal and the Maine area. And what we see here on the building, there's the tailor. So you do have the remnant of that time. The sweatshop, and of course the sewing machine allowed for workshops to be established, and many of the Jews were working there. And because of the owners, they were able to get their holidays off, and many of so they became known, and it was a very good place to make a living, as meager as it was. But it was, and sometimes the whole family would work in a in a sweatshop or a sewing room. And as you can see here from the correspondence from the United Garments, the business was conducted in Yiddish as well. One of the people who was a tailor, but originally started off as a peddler and opened up a fruits and vegetables store, was Herman Reitman. And after a while, he decided that he did not want to operate a fruits and vegetable store, and he and his wife started the Reitman's store on the Main at 446 Boulevard Saint Laurent. And it became one of the main stores in Canada. And you can see here the warehouse. They expanded. They started with one store and then another, and expanded and expanded. And today the warehouse has been renovated to function, I believe, as offices. And here you see the interior, and Reitman still exists, actually, and you can see the changes of the signage of Reitman's, but it's a store that's still in existence, and the children took over and kept going. The other one that was a staple on the Main was Warsaw Fruit Market, and the reason it's named that way, actually, it's a good story. They actually wanted to name it Warsaw because Leah Florkiewicz was from Poland. And they asked the painter, sign painter, to paint the sign on the store, and he made a mistake and he added an H to it, and they didn't have the $2 to pay to have it repainted, so it became Warsaw, and the name continued no matter how much they expanded, and here they expanded even more. Today, this is what remains of the store. It's actually, but there is a sign at the entrance to the building remembering the store. And the woman that started it actually died. She was over 100 years old when she passed away. And there was a big article in the newspaper announcing the closure of the store. The other one that was very successful was Steinberg's. And Ida Steinberg opened a store on Saint Laurent Boulevard as well. And she started with the family and a fairly large store. But the kids took over, and Steinberg's became one of the main supermarket chains in Montreal. And I know when I moved to Montreal, Steinberg was the place to go for all the groceries. Of course, you would have the kosher butcher, as I said, the staple of any Jewish community, and you see the Jewish meat market here. And but the main influence of the Jews on Montreal is actually the food. And more specifically, smoked meat, the bagels, and the pickled fishes, sorry. And as you can see, they started being delivered. And if you ask any Montrealers what the main thing, like, Jewish delis are the thing that they want to, they go to the Main, to Saint Laurent Boulevard to eat. And Schwarz's is the most famous of all of them. It started in the 1927, and it's the Mecca, as they say, for smoked meat sandwiches. And today you can still see it. It still stands where it was, and you can see thank you. And this is what and you can have fries with it, you can have a pickle, but you must have black cherry Coke with it. That's a tradition that you can't break. And across the street from it, there is the Jewish delicatessen, the Main, and you can see the writing, imitating Hebrew writing on the Main sign. And I just took this picture in December, so it still stands there as ever. And now I'm going to get off the Main. I think I still have a little bit of time. And the other thing Montreal is very famous for, thanks to the Jews, is the bagels. And I thought this was an article. There was a headline: "The best place to feel lonely is in a bagel shop." So if you're in Montreal, you have tons of places to feel lonely in, and you'll be doing okay. But just to give you an idea, this is what a Montreal bagel looks like. This is what a New York bagel looks. They are very distinct, and they were started by Eastern European and who apparently had the right recipe to do that. Two of the most famous bagel shops which still exist is the Fairmont Bagel Shop and Saint Viateur Bagel. And the one on Fairmont is the older one, but this one has the better bagels, and the way they are made and why they're so distinctive, they're soaked in honey and water, and then they're baked in a firewood stove. And this is the Saint Viateur bagel shop here, but oops. But if you see the Fairmont, they have the same oven in either places. And the other thing that obviously every Jewish community would need to have is synagogues. And you can have, there were 17 of them in the area, if you can imagine. So I won't show all 17 of them, but I will show some of the ones that I thought were more representative. And you had some big ones. This one was demolished and no longer there. The other one is the Chevra Kadisha Synagogue, which again, the size one, but that was demolished as well. Bnei Jacob on Fairmont was built in 1919, which is quite a large one. This is what it looks like today. Egypt in Montreal. And then you had the more modest ones, like this one. This is what it looks like today. This is when it was a synagogue. And on the inside, you can see it was very, very modest. But and as I said, there were 17 of them. So there were certain groups that just wanted their own shul to run it the way they wanted it, and they didn't want to join the big ones. Again, you have the small ones, and you have the yeshiva, and you can see how modest they are. Backstreet Shul, or the Temple Solomon, which was built it was a house that was converted into a synagogue, and it's very modest, and it still functions. And this is what it looks like today. And way back when I did my first talk for this in Brunswick, I actually talked about the synagogue. So. And of course, you needed schools, and so you had the Hebrew school. And one of the things that the archivist pointed out to me was the number of twins. You have 1, 2, and I can't remember what the third one. There's another pair of twins in a very small class. But the main school, Jewish school, was the Talmud Torah, which started at Bnei Jacob on Fairmount by a rabbi in 1896, and it was the school started before they moved into the synagogue, just in case you were looking at the dates. And it was basically a supplementary school. So you did go to a regular school during the day, and then it was in the evenings or Sundays that you would go to Hebrew school. And one of the interesting ones I found was Baron Bing High School on Rue Saint Hubert, and that street was actually whole Jewish. There was no non-Jewish people living on that street. And one of the problems was that with high school was that you had to pay to go to high school. And most of the kids who went to high school went to the Protestant school, the schools that were run by the Protestant school board. And they were not very happy that there was such a large number of Jewish kids in their school. So they decided to build a school in the middle of all the Jewish settlements, specifically for the Jewish children. And that was opened in 1921, and they named it after the Governor General, Baron Bing. And what happened was that apparently the school started scoring the highest in all the tests, and very prominent people like doctors, lawyers, senators, all graduated from the school. I'm not going to name them because I don't think they would make my, be this is the first year that they had a class picture. But William Shatner, the actor, he graduated from Baron Bink. I'm not sure if you're a Star Trek fan as I am, so you might. I'm hoping you know him. And the other one was Mordechai Richler, who is quite a famous author. I'm not sure how much outside of Canada he's famous, but he's very well known here because he wrote a lot of books about the Jewish community in Montreal and the ins and outs of all of it. And eventually the Jewish population started declining. As I mentioned, that's happened in other places. Declined, other immigrant groups started moving in, and in case of the Maine, it was the Greek community that took over. So, and I think I made it in 20 minutes too.